Hi, I'm David LaMotte. Thanks so much for taking a couple of minutes to share in some excitement with me about something I'm tremendously excited about. Here's the scoop. We're putting out an illustrated book in May of this year, 2012, and the book is based on a poem that I wrote a few years ago, and the poem is based on a true event. So the story is true. Now you know there's a difference between true and factual, but this one happens to be both. So here's what happened. In 2007, there was a small group of white supremacists who had a little rally in Knoxville, Tennessee. And the counter-protesters that day came up with a brilliant approach. What they did was they dressed as clowns. They formed a group called the Ku Klux Klans. That's C-O-U-P, Klutz, Clowns. And the CCC met the KKK in the streets of Knoxville, Tennessee. But the clowns didn't meet hatred with hatred. They didn't meet anger with anger. What they did was they supported this march by chanting along things that were ever so slightly altered from what the white supremacists were chanting. So the white supremacists were chanting white power, and the clowns said, yeah, that's great, let's have a march in support of white flour. And they pulled out the props they had brought with them. They had brought flour, bags of flour, and they threw it on each other and they threw it in the air, and they had a great flour fight and had a lot of fun. And all of this humor disarmed, to a great degree, what was going on here with this rally. And it gets better. As they marched on, the clowns said, wait, maybe we heard that wrong. Maybe it was white flowers. And they got out a bunch of white flowers and started passing them around. And then they marched a little farther and they said, oh, no, that wasn't it. I think it was tight showers. So they pulled out some camp showers and they tried to squeeze beneath them, but they couldn't fit because it was tight, right? And then finally, they pulled out my favorite one. They held up signs, they pulled on wedding dresses, and they started to chant, wife power. Now all this humor was not only whimsical and funny, it was that, but it was also really disarming and really effective in countering all this hatred. It embodies some really important lessons about how we meet that kind of hatred. And so I love the story, and it really moved me when a friend of mine sent me that article. I carried the article around in my pocket for weeks, and I was telling people about it. And finally I was on tour. I'm a singer-songwriter, and I was on tour down in Florida. I holed up in a hotel in Pensacola, and I wrote the whole thing into a poem. And I'm really proud of the poem, actually. It's a lot of fun. The story lends itself to some really nice pacing, and I laid that out pretty carefully in the poem. But it's not the poetry itself that's important here, it's the story that the poem tells. And the other thing that makes this a really exciting project is the art. I'm actually sitting here in the studio of Jen Hales, who's a Raleigh, North Carolina-based artist, and she does exquisite work. And one of the things that I love about her work is that it has this kind of richness and depth that sit in a beautiful tension with a real whimsy. And that's, of course, exactly what we're trying to do with this poem. So when I was introduced to Jen's work, I thought, oh, this is the perfect artist to do this book with me. Jen did extensive research in making this art. She studied a lot of photographs of the Knoxville skyline and of various street scenes. So if you're familiar with Knoxville, you'll actually see places you recognize in the book. So Jen did the paintings for this book with acrylic on birch panel plywood. And she actually works with the grain in some of the paintings as well. So if you look very closely, you'll see how the grain of the wood factors into the art. That sort of makes sense for this project as well, because some of those clowns who originally put on this action are environmental activists, and it's nice that all this is kind of tying together in some beautiful and subtle ways. I'm also proud of how we're going to manufacture this book. It's not being printed in China, it's actually being printed in Canada by Friesens, which is actually the company that printed the Harry Potter books from North America. And when I started flipping through their website, I found that there were several titles that are in my own son's children's book library as well. They do exquisite work, and they actually printed my first children's book, which is right here. So I know the quality of work they do. It'll be a hardcover book, and it will have responsibly harvested wood, certified by an independent agency, and also some post-consumer recycled content in the pages. That all feels important to a story like this, to tell it in the right form as well as the right content. So if all goes well, we're going to release this book May 26th of 2012. And that date is significant because it's the 5-year anniversary of the original rally that inspired the poem that inspired the book. So it all comes home. So thanks so much for sharing in our excitement and checking out this video. I appreciate those few minutes of your time. I'm already happy that you've watched this, even if you don't decide to be a part of the Kickstarter campaign, because I've had the chance to tell the story again. If you do want to be involved, though, there are several ways you can do it. One, spread the word. Just send this URL for this site around to anybody who you think might be interested, and help us get the word out about this exciting project. Or, if you would like to be a part of the Kickstarter campaign, there are several levels at which you can do that. One is just to pre-order the book, either physically or as an ebook. Those details are down here on the page. You can check that out. And then there's several other tiers of participation and several things you can read about and ways that you could be involved and particular incentives for you to be involved. At the top tier of that is a concert in your home. I'll happily come anywhere in the world when we find a little slot on my calendar that I can get there and do a concert for you, for a few of your friends, or for a large group in a public venue, as however you would like to do it. So thank you very much for sharing in our excitement about this. We're thrilled, and we hope you will catch a little bit of that excitement as well. Thank you for helping us to tell a story that needs to be told.
I'm embarrassed that it took so long to see, but what these marchers march for is a cause quite dear to me. Wife power, she exclaimed. And all the other clowns joined in. They shook their heads and laughed at how erroneous they'd been. The women clowns were hoisted up on shoulders of the others. Some pulled on wedding dresses, shouting, "Here's to wives and mothers!"